Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Today, we have Patrick McGill, the Chief Analytics Officer at Community Health Network. And today, we're speaking about how data is improving clinical outcomes. And welcome to the show, Patrick. I'm so excited to kind of have you on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And could you introduce yourself and tell the audience more about your background, especially within the healthcare space?
Sure. So, as you said, Patrick McGill, I'm the Chief Analytics Officer at Community Health Network. My background and training is I'm a family physician. I still do practice one day a week. Community Health Network is an integrated health system in Indianapolis, Indiana, 5 hospitals, 4 smaller hospitals. And in my Chief Analytics Officer role, we have a unique structure at Community in that I report to the CEO, but I oversee all of our data and analytic central functions, our Analytics Center of Excellence. But I also oversee all of our information technology operations as well. Clinical informatics, we don't currently have a CMIO, but all of our clinical informatics functions report to me. And then we call our process improvement enterprise services or business process management. So those functions report to me, and then, of course, regulatory reporting as well. So we have a unique structure where the Chief Analytics Officer actually oversees IT and informatics as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And data can be used in many different ways in depending on the industry that you're kind of working in. And for you specifically, you're working in the healthcare space, which is a very highly regulated space, especially with, patients' data or a lot of data that you work with. And so how is data being used in the healthcare space for specifically clinical outcomes?
We use data analytics in a lot of different ways at Community, but first and foremost, we use it for one of our values is patients first. So we always try and start with the patient and use a lot of data. We have a lot of improvements around quality and safety outcomes, value-based care, cost of care. And so that's probably the major area, or that's at least where we started several years ago, was focusing on unnecessary clinical variation, quality and safety outcomes. So that's one area that we look at. We also use it for operational improvements. So when we're looking at how our practices run, which would look at access for patients, quality improvement, productivity, some of those types of things. We use a lot of data, or we have a lot of analytics around in the ambulatory space for our practice management. And then recently, with some of the changes that occurred last year, some of the social changes that occurred last year with COVID, we've had a lot of analytics around, or a lot of projects around COVID, and then race and social equity as well. So looking at our health equities and health outcomes as it pertains to race, ethnicity, and gender.
Yeah, definitely. And super interesting stuff you're working on. Can you talk about any specific projects that you were able to really use data within your industry and your line of work?
Yeah, I think the ones that are really top of mind, obviously COVID. We had a lot of analytics around COVID and outcomes and the disparities with COVID. Certainly when the pandemic started last year, we needed a lot of data around, or a lot of analytics around what was going on in the network when it came to capacity, testing, PPE availability. So that's really probably a major project that we've been, working on since last year and then continuing. I mentioned the race and health equities of work. That's an ongoing project to really evaluate all of our process measures and making sure that the outcomes and the processes are similar via race. We've recently launched a fairly large project around social determinants of health. We have a network goal this year to screen as many patients as possible for social determinant or social needs, and then identifying any gaps that they would have to close those gaps. And so that's another large analytic project to better understand our needs. We have a couple key partnerships leveraging predictive analytics or artificial intelligence when it comes to social determinants. And so those projects are kicking off as well, leveraging publicly available social determinant data. Obviously, all of our population health when it relates to quality and outcomes, such as cancer screenings and other measures, diabetes control, high blood pressure control. Those are large analytic projects that we've been working to automate. And then, like I mentioned, the practice management, that's a huge body of work where we're really trying to push data to the fingertips of the clinicians, all of our physicians. We have about 1,200 physicians and APPs that are employed by our network. So really push data to their fingertips to allow them to manage their practice and see what levers they need to pull to change. So those are some. We've also got financial analytics that we've been working on. We had a great financial predictive model that we had built before the pandemic. And obviously the pandemic really kind of destroyed that predictive model, but we hope to rebuild it soon.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. A lot of different things that you're working on that kind of really involve data. And I know that a lot of different industries are trying to work on being more data driven and AI driven, since that's kind of the hot new thing, and that's just how technology has kind of advanced and evolved throughout the years. And so, how has your organization really been more data driven throughout the past years?
Yeah, so, and I mentioned some of this earlier too. About 2.5 years ago, we decided through some different conversations and organizational evaluations to pull analytics out of IT. We created the Analytics Center of Excellence, created a Chief Analytics Officer role. That was the first step that we had, that we really wanted to make the organization data driven. In the Analytics Center of Excellence, we have between 40 to 50 people that focus on database administration, but also we're an Epic shop, so Epic Analytics or data warehouse analytics as well. And then we have deployed analysts as well. So we call them deployed. They're analysts that are dedicated to a specific business unit. They kind of live in that business unit, but they're tied back to the central Analytics Center of Excellence centrally for data governance and some other activities. So that's really, how we've really tried to drive the organization to be more data driven. One of the initiatives that we have this year specifically is to really improve our data literacy. Over the last couple of years, we've really been able to advance our analytic capabilities. We've moved our data warehouse to the cloud, so we're starting to build out some native machine learning, artificial intelligence algorithms. We've just now gotten some of that work off the ground now that we have the capabilities. And so as we've advanced our analytic capabilities, we really realized that the organization needs more assistance or more help with data literacy. And so that's actually one of our network goals this year, is to really train and educate our frontline caregivers or operational leaders around how to use data to drive their business or to make business decisions, data at their fingertips, how to understand, how to access data. We have a large project around self-service analytics as well. So trying to really make data really available throughout the organization, and then empower and enable people, leaders and frontline caregivers to be able to use that data daily, whether it's in a clinical setting or an operational or business setting as well.
Yeah, and great explanation. And so throughout this whole process of just you working with your teams and the different analytics processes that you work with in terms of using the data, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in your line of work?
I think a lot of the challenges that we have, or that we've had in the past, really has been capabilities. I mean, it's probably several fold. One has been capabilities. A lot of healthcare organizations really focus a lot of their data and analytics on their EMR as their source system, source record for patient care. But as we know, there's a lot of activities that occur outside that are not recorded in the EMR, whether it's a patient experience or other patient journey or processes, some business processes as well. And so, really developing the capabilities to understand the processes has been one of the biggest challenges. I think every healthcare organization would agree that recruiting and retaining talent, analytic talent, analysts, data scientists, database architects, and administrators is a challenge. We compete against a lot of other technology companies, and I think having the talent, we really have tried to, over the last couple of years, to build a pipeline strategy, partnering with some of the universities and other methods to grab people early in their career, hopefully train them up, and then help them, really find their passion with helping patients with data and healthcare as an industry. So those are probably some of the two. There's a lot, we could go into a lot of other challenges as it comes to data quality and cleansing and how the data is structured in the EMR. I think those are things that every healthcare system struggles with as well when it comes to structured versus unstructured data, and then technology as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And my final question, just to wrap everything up, is how do you kind of see the future of these clinical outcomes coming? So in terms of just the next few years, how do you see the future of it kind of changing?
Yeah, I think, we're seeing this transition here in healthcare becoming more consumer driven. So I think, to really be consumer driven, that's driven off of data. Every Google, Amazon, any big digital retailer, they're all driven off of data. They know their customers, they respect their customers. And so I think that if you talk about consumerism in healthcare, data is at the center of that. And so I think healthcare is going to have to become more data driven and data centered. I think the other piece is we have to become more process driven in healthcare. And this has been a journey that many organizations have been on over the last few years. And, I think when we're talking about health outcomes and equity and some other things, one of the ways to improve that is to really look at the processes and hardwire those processes. Well, to be able to measure those processes, you have to have data. And so we really try and teach a community to let's look at the processes and then develop the analytics to measure those processes versus the opposite of, well, just give me a dashboard to tell me where I need to improve. No, let's go to the front line, understand the processes, standardize those, and then we can use data to measure those. I think another area that's obviously very data driven is the shifting in payment models. And so as more organizations shift to more value-based care models and direct to employer or move away from fee-for-service type of reimbursement, that's all driven and predicated on having good data on patient activity and cost of care and outcomes. And then one final, we mentioned it earlier, is the continued advancement of advanced analytics in healthcare, AI and machine learning and some others. And that, it's really using those capabilities to augment the EMR and augment the EMR documentation and workflows. I think those are some of the big buckets and big areas where we're really going to see some advancement over the next, 3 to 5, 7, 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. And great insight for kind of the future of these clinical outcomes here with using data as well. And I wanted to say thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us today and being on our show. We at the Data Standard, we're trying to build a community where everyone can just network and collaborate with each other. So what is something that we can do for you?
I think that this is, a lot of organizations in healthcare that are really doubling down and really focusing on data. I think it's a small group at this point. It's a growing group, but there's a lot of insights that can be gained. So I think the first and foremost would be collaboration and shared learnings, best practices, how to do a lot of this stuff. I think when you look at the data continuum, healthcare is relatively new in this space. And so I think there's a small group of us that are really focused on this and being able to collaborate and share. I think that's the biggest thing. I hope that as a result of this session today, that opens the doors for more collaboration and sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important to really support each other just in the technology field as well, and just share your ideas and network and collaborate. So we'll make sure to connect you with people after this podcast. And where can everybody find you online if they want to look for you to connect?
Yeah, so I actually pretty active on LinkedIn. So that's reach out. That's one place to start. I'm also on Twitter. So that's another area. Don't post as much on Twitter, more on LinkedIn. And then I just started down the Medium route as well. So connect with me on Medium. Certainly I think Medium is an interesting place to start to grow and do some of these shared learnings. But absolutely LinkedIn, Twitter, those are the great places to connect with me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to our audience, for more information on the Data Standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as on our LinkedIn and YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show and just learn more about data within your industry. So hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me today.